Diane Murenbeeld. Claire is the artistic producer and the program director at the Old Town Hall, a multidisciplinary arts center in Waterford, Ontario. Her passion is building community through the arts while creating and fostering outrageously empowering opportunities for young leaders. Claire has written and directed several children's musical theater productions and has received the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal for her cultural and community work with kids. Welcome, Claire. Diane is the Director of Marketing at Explore Waterloo Region. Explore Waterloo Region is a non-profit organization that's recognized as the destination marketing organization for the full Waterloo region, which includes Cambridge, Kitchener, Waterloo, North Dumfries, Wellesley, Wilmot, and Woolwich. Diane is the creative and dynamic community connector who dreamed up the 2020 Art Fresco project. Welcome to you both. I'm super excited to have you join me here today with the broader community in a conversation of art and community and the importance of connection and belonging through the arts. This is meant to be an engaging conversation, as Taylor mentioned, so feel free to engage with us in this conversation as we move into our Q&A session at the end. I know that both of you have some really amazing stories to share, so let's jump right into it. Last year was a pretty different year for all of us. And for most of us, that meant, the way that we do things was different. And that meant that our plans were changing in one way, shape, or form, whether we liked it or not. And so we needed to adapt. And there were some pretty beautiful connections and pretty amazing projects that were born in a time when we were all asked to isolate and disconnect. Community developers like yourself really took that challenge on and pivoted quickly to adapt to our new realities. So the Art Fresco in the region of Waterloo and the Main Street Music Stroll in Waterford were two projects that were born in the age of COVID. I would like to start off this conversation by giving you a chance to tell us a little bit about the project and the motivation behind them. So Claire, maybe we'll start off with you and give us a little bit of a background on the project.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone. I'm so honored to be here in this space with you. And I'm really glad this is happening now and not at the beginning of COVID because I'm a bit of a Luddite and I'm not really great online, but I've gotten used to Zoom, which I think everyone has. So this actually feels kind of comfy and good. Yes, like Nadwa said, I'm in a little town called Waterford in southwestern Ontario in Norfolk County, on the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee and Mississauga nations. And we are a multidisciplinary arts center that programs live music and theater, and among other things. But one of the things that's so precious to this community that we began doing even before the building, the theater, the Old Town Hall was back to complete renovation, was outdoor music every Thursday on our lawn. That's been a tradition for many, many years, and in and of itself a very community building thing. So it just kind of happens like clockwork. There's a group of volunteers, we have local and regional musicians that jump on board and have an opportunity to perform. And so when COVID hit, we were kind of like, well, what are we going to do? Like, we can't gather people. Everything is shut down. Music is kind of like, there was this thing where like music was outlawed. So we were afraid to sing. We were afraid to do anything. We didn't know about, how COVID was spread. I mean, we've learned a little bit more about it, but I know that you all probably remember those early days where we just were terrified of doing anything wrong. So we sat down with the information that we had and thought, well, what can we do in our community? These are the things we can't do. What can we do? We can't gather people. We can't bring people into the space. We can't, have a person singing to an audience. So what we decided to do was to pull apart the audience and place musicians back on private property on lawns throughout our town. It's a really beautiful town. We have a gorgeous main street with, century homes and looming trees, and we thought when summer comes, folks can go outside and enjoy the fresh air and not gather on our lawn, but rather walk the streets. And if there is a musician sort of back on someone's property, they can perform and folks can stop and listen and move on and listen to another artist. And I mean, we'll probably get into this later. There's so many benefits to that. So that was sort of the little embryo of the idea, was to rethink what an audience is. So kind of like, busking, when you go to a busker fest and there's artists and performers everywhere and you can wander about and stop and listen to one artist and move on. But in our case, the buskers were on lawns. So there was sort of a control in terms of how far back the musician could be, and the audience was sort of restricted to being on the sidewalk and walking by. So that's what we did. We did it all summer long, and then also we'll sort of get into how we put into place protocols and how we kept it safe and all of that. But that's sort of a basic overview of what we did in Waterford.
Thank you so much for giving us that background. The imagery that you described was just so beautiful. I felt like I was being transported into that space. I'm like almost, anxiously waiting for summer to happen so that I can engage in a project as such. And I know, Diane, that there was a lot of beauty in the project that was done in the Waterloo region as well, with so many vibrant colors and different artists being involved in pulling together the art fresco in the region of Waterloo. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that and how that came to be.
I'd be delighted. Thank you for inviting me here today to talk about a passion project that we undertook and that continues to take place in a slightly different form, we hope, in the coming years. But Art Fresco was born from the need to try and support in a way that we could various communities that were hard hit when the pandemic took place. We wanted to support our hospitality businesses and tourism operators throughout the region, but it's difficult and we can't be seen as promoting going out when that flies in the face of what public health is saying. So navigating the waters of safe distancing and understanding what had been put in place with regards to a framework within the province of Ontario, we tried to conceive of something that could assist a few communities at once. And that's how the Art Fresco public art project was born. The project in its base level was the building of 50 picnic tables. How we decided on picnic tables was we thought that would be a perfect bubble dining piece or environment that we could potentially put out into the community. So those 50 picnic tables were constructed by our local Mennonite builder, and we were able to work with and support in this regard. And then we did a call for artists, inviting folks to participate in transforming these 50 tables into whatever their vision of Waterloo region or their current reality was. Among those artists, we had folks submit from various backgrounds, various levels of experience. We did have a learning moment in that submission period where an artist did reach out and made inquiries because the application seemed to favor those with maybe more experience in terms of their art career, and seemed to be a bit restrictive for those that were emerging artists. So we listened and we reissued our application, and we're really thrilled to see so much more engagement after we did that. And then because this was in the very middle of a global pandemic, we had to conceive of how we were going to have these tables transformed. Again, carving our own path here, we had no idea the who, what, where, when, why, how. So we were able to engage with one of our local venues, a 40,000 square foot space, where they were able to host us over a period of 2 weeks and really truly socially distance 50 tables. And the artists were able to come in over that 2-week period and safely paint at their leisure when they were able to do so. And then at the end of that 2 weeks, we had the tables delivered to restaurant patios throughout Waterloo region as a means of inviting people to come and enjoy a restaurant patio when they felt it was safe to do so. And it also was a beautiful talking piece to say that these are the pieces of art that were produced in the middle of this, and shine a light on a few of the communities that were came together to build something really beautiful.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing with us. I got a chance to look at some of the tables, and I'm truly blown away by the diversity in the art that was chosen on each of the tables, and in the stories and the inspirations for each of the artists to kind of bring the masterpiece to life. I know, Diane, that you had mentioned that there was a lot of involvement with the community and kind of sending out that call to artists in the community. Can you tell us a little bit more about how diverse these teams were?
We were really fortunate, and I think that was a top win from my perspective in terms of the project itself. We were pleased to have a father-daughter submit and each transform their own tables. She's 11, and he obviously is an adult established artist. We had another father-son and the son's partner representing the Indigenous community, and they did some beautiful work, and they had connections with other artists that were also participating. We had a mother-daughter come in and produce a piece. So really it was multi-generational, but at the same time, also folks of various backgrounds and cultures. We had an established artist who had just moved to the region with his wife, who is a Waterloo region native. So he was very new to the not only the area, but to the art scene regionally. And he was able to come in and transform 3 tables and meet and connect with other artists, obviously in a socially distanced fashion. But we were so very pleased and continue to be pleased to see how those connections, at least from all appearances on social media, have managed to withstand social distancing, and the connections that were made were long lasting. So that's just a small highlight of the varied backgrounds that we were able to see in terms of our artists who participated.
That's so beautiful to see that you were able to kind of bring together such a diverse team, which really made this super inclusive, but also really laid down the foundation for being able to build connections that maybe we wouldn't have even been able to make outside of a pandemic. So it's kind of like one of those silver linings that really wouldn't have been possible if we weren't actually put in such a peculiar situation. Claire, I know for the Main Street Music Stroll, there was a lot of obstacles that kind of came along the way for you and your team as you were pulling this together. And in some ways, it was obstacles that would have been considered wins outside of a pandemic situation. Tell us a little bit about that and how the team really pulled together to respond to some of those issues.
Oh, so first of all, yes, I'll address that in a moment, but I want to honor my team. My team was a group of young people, summer students and high school students, local high school students. So I think that's why this event, the conception of the event turned into something like immediately. There's so much enthusiasm, so much love for the community behind it, and so much determination to pull it off and make it happen. And I owe that to I call them my kids. They're not my kids, but I call them my kids, my summer students, because I said this in an interview earlier. I feel like I'm old now, so I say kids now for the next generation, for the younger generation. So they were my team. And we put this together, and there was signage, and there were protocols, and there was a social media campaign, and all sorts of things like that. There were, Abby Boatwright, who's a 17-year-old gal, my sort of right-hand woman throughout the summer. We would sometimes just kind of like walk down the street and like go, that's a nice lawn, and kind of hope the homeowner would, come out and we could just talk to them about our idea. So as we added homes, we were, the whole thing was very, very grassroots. And I think that's why it was so successful. We're very connected to our community. We can walk down the street and we do know our neighbors. And by the end of the summer, all of Waterford knew all of Waterford. We met our neighbors and we met newcomers and we developed these beautiful relationships. Okay, so the problem that arose was that it was too successful because nothing was happening. There was no music anywhere and no live music really anywhere. So folks started hearing about this and coming to Waterford, and sort of not as a tourism, kind of maybe as a tourism destination. So people were coming to Waterford to participate in this music stroll. And the streets, there was one particular Thursday, we did these Thursday nights, where our volunteers with their little lanyards and walking down the streets and making sure the music wasn't too loud and making sure people were distancing, reported back saying there was a little bit of danger in like folks, some people being outdoors and going, well, I don't have to wear a mask because I'm outdoors, and other people like wearing masks and going, okay, the sidewalks are kind of getting clogged. So I'm a presenter and I'm a producer, and my whole world is like getting the word out and gathering people. And this was like, this can't happen. This is something that we did to serve our community and to provide an alternative to programming that we couldn't do. And this was just a sort of community thing. And it turned into something a little more, which we anticipated might happen. And so in the beginning, our advertising was very local and very last minute. And we relied on just like local kind of social media and our sign and signs on the lawns and that sort of thing. But then social media sometimes blows up. So the way we handled that, old Claire said, like, I don't want like CBC to have this headline saying Waterford, Ontario is responsible for the pandemic just exploding. And I was like, we're shutting it down. From the beginning, we said, like, if this happens, we're just going to shut it down. And Abby said, no, we're not. We're all about solving problems. So we have another problem. We're not going to solve it. We're shutting it down. Yes, we'll solve it, but then it will take away the beauty of this event and all of the, we were getting so many testimonials in terms of the benefits to folks getting out on the streets and their mental health, and artists, standing there performing and people giving them money and coming back every week, and they're actually making money. They're busking. And one fella said, like, this is my job now. Like, I come here, I busk, and I go home sometimes with $300 in my guitar case. No, we're not going to shut it down. Again, what can we do? Mm-hmm. So we expanded it. And we communicated to the folks that were coming. Again, every week we communicated, be thoughtful. We believe in you. We know you're good people. We know you want this to keep going. Be thoughtful, distance. And if Main Street seems to be busy, we are animating and activating another street in the town, a broader street, where there's much more room. So the community was like, okay, all right. They responded, they respected the event, they wanted it to keep going. We always did get those folks that came from other communities, but because it was an expanded event, it was almost impossible for people to clog the streets, because if you wanted to see all the music, you had to keep going. And we made it an hour long so that people were panicking to see everything. So they're hoofing it down the street, and they're not lingering. So that completely solves the problem. And when I say hoofing, I'm talking about people that are, that have the ability to walk, but there were wheelchairs, and there were mamas with babies and strollers, and all sorts of people participating in this.
That's amazing. Yeah, I know. I love that you took the opportunity to honor your team. I think that really speaks volumes for the work that you guys do. And I know that you shared with me during our conversation that a lot of your kids or your summer students were actually, natives of Waterford that were coming back home because of all of the COVID restrictions. So I think that really, again, one of those like silver linings as part of the pandemic, you had resources and insights and support from a segment of the community that wouldn't have necessarily been there if it wasn't for, being in a global pandemic. So it really does highlight kind of the layers of community connections that get to be built in such a interesting time that we're going through.
It's true. We're rich. We're so resource rich. We don't realize it, I think, sometimes. Like my daughter was living in Toronto, and she came home, and suddenly I'm like, my small town has another resource, another creative mind who's like gone out there and experienced so much and is back here. So, a lot of these, university students or, kids who've moved on. I mean, we had high school students here, working and volunteering with us, but a lot of these university students that came back, they're coming back like, ugh, I have to come home. I got to leave the city, and I can't pay rent anymore, and there's so many problems. And I'm like, oh, yes, come back and be engaged in your community and see what you can offer. And it's just, like you said, silver lining. It's been really beautiful.
That's wonderful. I know, Diane, when we had spoken, this level of engagement wasn't necessarily accessible to everyone in our communities. And sometimes there was, the COVID realities were really, really highlighted for certain populations in our communities where they weren't able to engage even in a safe way. But I know that there was one beautiful story that you shared with me that I'd like you to share with the rest of the community here about how even when it came to that, we were able to kind of overcome that and really connect through the arts and connect as a broader community. Did we lose Diane? Oh no. We'll just give her a minute. Again, the highlight.
I do apologize. I'm having some internet lag, so I believe.
I kindly ask that maybe all the folks who are joining us turn off their cameras or their video to maybe reduce the amount of bandwidth that's being pulled through. Awesome, thank you so much. Go ahead, Diane. You're on mute, Diane. We can't hear you.
Technical difficulties indeed. Apologies, internet 2021 meetings. We were so very pleased to see that the support of the greater community when we across social media had noticed that one particular individual who was a senior and immunocompromised did a reach out across social media to say, I'm unable to get out and about to see these transformed tables in real life. And to the rescue, some of her comrades were able to go out and photograph various tables on these patios and share them. And it was just a really beautiful thing to see that even virtually, the Art Fresco project was able to help people remain connected in some way, shape, or form. And truly, it was a highlight that I'll never forget.
I'm on mute as well. Thank you for sharing that. I know when you had shared that with me, it was really such a moving story to see that the community could really connect beyond boundaries. Again, I think having the ability to connect more so virtually, I mean, we've always really had the ability, but being able to tap into it even more now to connect to parts of our communities that didn't necessarily have access before just really widens the scope of accessibility. So thank you for sharing that story. I think it definitely speaks volumes. I know that, you know, art is always influenced by the times. And we've seen this, you know, over centuries of art coming out of very difficult times. And there's no doubt that these times will be remembered for years to come. 2020 was one of those, you know, very like bold years. It was a new decade. It was a global pandemic. There was so much going on. I'm wondering what you ladies think about, you know, how these projects are in a way a reflection of our time and perhaps a positive memory or a light for people to remember. How do you think these projects will be remembered by future generations to come? So maybe we'll start off with Diane.
I think one of our artists said it best, and she, and this was a recurring theme where artists would come in and say, right before they left after completing their masterpiece, would thank us for the opportunity and more so for providing a space and a bright light amongst the all the other, I guess, negatives of that the global pandemic presented. And I think over time, we're really trying to look at this as a bit of a legacy project. So it's our intention that this coming patio season, the tables make their way to new spaces across the region. And we want to provide opportunities for all the artists to have even a second season of being able to, okay, maybe I can go and work with the restaurateur and just have that connection again to say, I'm so proud to have a piece at this location. We did have someone last year who would almost do coffee chats every 2 weeks and invited folks from the community to come and join him at his table at its location. So we're hoping that type of connection can take place for years to come.
That's awesome. I know that the concept of the table was one that was selected with intention. Tell us a little bit about that. What was so unique about the table itself? I'm not sure if we lost her, but Claire, maybe we'll bounce back to you. How do you feel like the Main Street music stroll will evolve in the future? And what about it in 2020 that will be a highlight for people to remember in future years to come?
How will it evolve? Well, one of the things, again, like the wisdom from the younger folks I was surrounded by last year, and still it resonates. And I think one of the things that came out of one of our meetings was, we don't want to do something that just reeks of the pandemic. Like, we have to do this because of the pandemic. So everyone that's there is acutely aware that the event is all about the pandemic, and at least we're doing something. We wanted to do something that we could do every year, that was a really cool way of animating the community, that could be done without, like, pandemic or no pandemic. It just felt good. It just felt, it was a way to build community. It was a way to connect people in the community. It was a way to build relationships, and for people to enjoy music, which is the universal language, and for musicians to be able to perform, period. So how it will continue is that this is the model that we're going to use moving forward. So, as we learned more about COVID, and as we learned that, we can gather safely, and, as long as we're distanced and preferably outdoors, we added the element of, I'm looking out my window because I'm actually looking at the lawn that musicians play on. We added the element of musicians performing on our front steps and an audience being there. So we kind of came full circle, but we limited the number of people who could be in the audience, and we ensured that they were distanced. And that solved the problem of folks that didn't have mobility, had mobility issues, and weren't able to, go through the town. So that element ended up coming back in a way. So it's the music stroll this year is going to look exactly the same way that it looked last year at the end of the summer. So there'll be a static element where folks sit and are distanced if they wish, and there will be that moving element that we put into effect as well. Hope that answered your questions.
It did, yes, yeah. Because I think, as we kind of transition out of 2020, a lot of the lingering effects of 2020 aren't, necessarily all gone. There are still some, restrictions in place, and we as communities have to be cautious and aware and really safe as we kind of engage within the broader community. And so building this like hybrid model moving forward, and really kind of building on the steam that was generated in 2020 is kind of what I was trying to get at. Because I think folks are, for some folks, they kind of got stuck in the 2020 bubble of like, okay, like we can't do anything, we have to go back to the normal. But really our new normal is an adapted normal. It's a hybrid normal of, the old and the new. So I really love that concept. And I really love the concept of layers of integration within the community for both of your projects. I know, Diane, like you started off by telling us about how these tables were located in business locations. And so this element of, okay, we're bringing in a community member to actually build the tables, and then we're bringing in artists to paint the tables, and then we're bringing in businesses within the community to kind of like host these tables. And so this element of multi-layered connections, I don't know would have been possible outside of a project like this. So I really love this concept of like layers of connections. And Claire, same with your project, where you reached out outside the steps of the town hall and reached out to people directly so that they can host the musicians on their front lawns. And so this concept of like, layers of connection is really a beautiful one. Claire, are you able to maybe tell us a little bit of how you guys ended up recruiting some of those community members to host you on their lawns? Because I think there's a pretty funny story around that.
Oh, well, actually, I think that is probably the most important piece to this. In order to build community, in order to have, there's a word I'm looking for, not authority, but the trust of your community. There is work that needs to be done behind the scenes and over the years in terms of building that. And I mean, this is just one element and one aspect of what we do here at the Waterford Old Town Hall. We are engaged in our community, and our mandate is to enhance the cultural lives of those in Waterford and the surrounding area. So we're an outward-looking organization, and we're always wanting to engage with the community rather than we're going to program a thing, and here's the thing, and come to our door and come in and watch this thing. We're about relationships. That's really, really important to us. So from the time kids, we open our doors to children for summer camp or dress up in drama or town hall kids theater, we are engaging with the community. We're going into the schools. We're inviting schools to bring classes into, we have a gallery here, an art gallery. We're inviting the community in. We're out in the community. We are a family, and we are always engaging and thinking of ways to connect. And when we have newcomers and we have folks moving into Waterford, which is happening, in small towns, I guess, everywhere in Ontario, we want to know who those folks are, and we want to know how to get them in our doors and how to keep engaging. So we had that. Still can't think of the word, but we built up that relationship. That relationship was already there. So it was easy. It was so easy to get people to say yes. And it was like, well, I already know who lives in this house. I already know who lives in that house. I know my neighbors. And if I don't, Abby does. And if she doesn't, then this person does. So that's the beauty of a small town. So I just got on the phone, did some cold calls, knocked on some doors. Well, didn't knock on doors again, but oh yeah, we accosted people in their gardens. And we met new community members, and neighbors met neighbors, and musicians built relationships with the homeowners that were hosting them. And it just was this beautiful, like a lot of the things, we weren't like intentional. We weren't like, we're going to do a community building event and here's the, the things that are going to come of it. But we did. It's so much more than we ever anticipated came from it. So the funny story, I don't know what the funny story was. We did have someone actually move to Waterford because of the music stroll.
That's amazing. I know you had mentioned when we spoke that there was like conversations at the grocery store, because that was like the only place anyone was ever going. And it was like, hey, by the way, you live at this address. Do you mind hosting us here?
Yeah, yes, that's true. I feel like I could have been like the creepiest person ever because I was like scoping out people's homes and like going, But I look at it more as like a scout, a location scout. It's more dignified.
Cool. Absolutely. And I love this, like the essence of, and I heard Risha speak about this in the past about asset-based community building, and you're really like, you're giving the community the tools, you're giving them the power to really engage within their communities their way by using their talents, their assets to connect with other community members, as opposed to like really like funneling in what you think is appropriate. You kind of just provide the space and people just, come in and really work with their assets and their talents to open up their doors, quite literally in this case, to provide that opportunity for everyone in the broader community to connect. So I absolutely love that concept of like asset-based community building. So really on brand with our conversation. So I love that quite much. Diane, I know like for your project as well, like the connections were made, like I said earlier, across businesses and artists and community members. Tell us a little bit about how those connections were made. How did artists get partnered up with where the tables ended up? How did businesses interact? I know there was a story that you shared with me when we spoke earlier about how one of the tables, one in particular, wasn't going to move.
I think a lot of connections were a bit fortuitous in terms of how they happened. We did try and place tables where we thought thematically it might suit that particular host patio, but one table in particular, as it so happened, it just randomly arrived and they took delivery of this table. Each table has a plaque on it in order to give credit to that particular artist, along with a QR code. So anyone seated at that table can scan that code and find out more about the inspiration for that particular piece of art or some of the artist's background. And on this particular delivery, this table has found a home that was, there was a little more connection at play thanks to the universe providing. And that was that one of the servers at this restaurant, it happened to be their daughter who had transformed this table. And there were many tears of joy, and we've been asked, please don't take our table away. This is the table that we need. So they've already put dibs on, we need to keep this one. So that was lovely to see. And in terms of connecting artists with artists and other connections that were made, we were fortunate in that one of our local businesses or headquarters for a major business is Home Hardware. So when we were looking to partner to get materials in order to transform these tables, we were so fortunate that our local St. Jacobs headquartered business, Home Hardware, was able to and interested in the project as a whole. So much so that they also voluntold, but I think in the end, the folks were quite pleased to participate. We had the beauty tone, someone from the beauty tone department, along with a graphic designer from Home Hardware. They also transformed tables, but were able to really engage with artists to see like how their product was used and what their inspiration, and see another, just what is their day-to-day product used in an entirely different way. So so many different angles and so many different lights were able to be shone on different communities as over the run of the project. So very, very pleased.
Rookie mistake. I always forget to unmute. I know that there was, it's interesting that you mentioned the Home Hardware connection, because Home Hardware was also the supplier for a lot of the paint that you guys were using. So I know that there was a bit of a hiccup, COVID related, that was, that came about with that, and you guys were still able to bounce back from that and really recover well. Do you want to share a little bit about the hiccup that you guys encountered of one of the main assets that you needed to actually paint these tables? I'm not sure if we lost Diane again. Okay, I think we may have lost her, but I know that Diane had shared with me that there was a shortage of paint, which made painting quite a difficult task, but definitely something that they were able to bounce back from and actually get the 50 tables painted. I know that, there's been a lot of great ideas that communities have kind of taken upon themselves to integrate with current projects that exist, and really COVID-ified a lot of them to make sure that they're aligned with the current circumstances. But there's a lot of legwork to be able to put together these projects and to take into consideration a whole whack of information that wasn't always necessarily easily available, or sometimes it wasn't clear and everyone kind of wanted to be on the safe side. And so I know that there was a whole bunch of work that was kind of put together to set up almost like templates or resources to be able to get communities started, and for communities who are looking to partake in similar projects or partake in projects where they're bringing art to the forefront and really integrating that with community and building connections to empower members in their communities to connect through the arts. What tips would you give them? And where should they start? What are some of the things that they need to take into consideration, and where should they begin? So maybe Claire, we can start off with you. Share your wisdom.
Okay. I will share my wisdom. Well, I think I'll just share what we did. We basically started with a question. What do we have? And what can we do? I guess those are two questions. So it's in every community. Like, I feel like every human has a superpower, and I feel every community has a superpower. And in Waterford, our superpower, I think, is inherently connection. We connect, we support one another. Waterford, when something needs to be done, there's a problem, we kind of solve it. And and we're kind of known for just doing it and then going, oh, well, maybe let's think about bylaws and all of that, like after we've already done it. So it's like asking for forgiveness rather than permission. Like that, if Waterford was a person, that's kind of what it would be. So we have that. We already have that superpower. So in any community, I would sort of just sit down and sort of assess, what do we already have? What is our superpower? And what can we do? And then I think the next question is, what do we want? Mm-hmm. What kind of community do we want? And what, for me, I want a community that is, I just want a community filled with music and culture, and I want to live in a community where the arts are accessible. I want to live in a community where the neighbors know one another, where there's ownership, and there's ownership in this building and in this space, and a sense of belonging here. So I think it's like, point A is, what do we have? And what's our superpower? And point B is, where do we want to go? And just always start simple. Like, start really, really simple. Because I find you can add to that. Like, you can, once you perfect it and do something really, really simple, you can go, oh, well, here's another component that we can add and enhance it a little more, and then get that right, and then add another component or another team member, or and then build that way. But I would say, and I know I'm the rambler in the panel, so I'm just gonna say, start very simple. It's like with writers, write what you know, look at what you have, and then build on that to get where you want to go. But start simple, start grassroots. That's my even if I'm producing or presenting a large scale concert, I still start really, really small bites.
Mm-hmm. I love that concept, because you're kind of starting with what you have and where you want to end up. and everything in between. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's a global pandemic. It doesn't matter if it's something else. You'll find a way to like figure out how to get through those obstacles if you know where you want to end up. So I really do love that concept. Diane, any wisdom you want to share with community members of, if they want to do something similar, where should they start?
I think very similar to the themes that Claire was just presenting, look at what you do have. And we're fortunate in our region to have a ton of great, in our example, restaurants that are very community minded and incredible talent in terms of the arts. Look to what you do have and then go from there. But in addition to that, when organizing this type of initiative, try and take steps to make it a bit easier on yourself. So for example, our tables were 8 feet by 5.5 feet in terms of the tabletops themselves, but about 250 pounds each. So there was talk at the beginning, well, do we deliver all of these tables to the individual artists' locations? What does that look like? And we really thought, no, we can't. Just from a logistics standpoint, it would be time and cost prohibitive. So rather, we had the benefit of having this massive space that we were able to access, and a group of keen participants who really wanted to come in and enjoy and taking part in that transformation. So having 2 weeks of transforming time in one location was a far better option for us than trying to accommodate and do scheduling for 50 drop-offs. So I would say definitely be kind to yourself, make things a little bit, sometimes you have to look at options that might be outside of the box to solve some logistics issues. So that would be a big takeaway, I suppose.
No, for sure. And logistics in the time of COVID were 10 times harder than what they were before. So definitely great advice. I'd like to now maybe transition to the community engagement piece, where we'll open it up for question and answer and comments or stories that you'd like to share. I will start off by saying that there's a comment here in the chat box from Rachel, who really pointed out something that's kind of unique to both of your projects, where yes, we were able to engage with communities at a virtual level, but for members of the community who didn't have access to internet, both of your projects gave community members the physical aspect as well. So thank you, Rachel, for highlighting that, and feel free to unmute yourself and share some of those comments with us. But that's an important highlight to call out here, is that, it was a hybrid, again, of, involving the virtual piece, but also the physical piece as well. Okay, so again, feel free to unmute yourself or to raise your hand. I think if you click on the participants list, there's a raise hand option. So feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you have any questions. But I will read one of the questions here from Risha in the chat box while we wait for some folks to share some live questions with us. Risha asks, I would love to hear about the support from local government, gifts and capacity first, and bylaws second approach. So Claire, maybe do you want to take that question on?
Sure. What we did was legal, first of all, but as the event grew, and local government. So local government was very supportive and thrilled with what was happening. We kind of did it on our own without asking for any help, or we didn't really need anything. We just needed to make sure that, we were following guidelines. And as we know, during COVID, guidelines changed quite a bit. We did, however, get to a point in the fall where we have an event in Waterford called Pumpkin Fest, and there was no Pumpkin Fest because of COVID. And there was a bit of funding from the municipal government to help enhance Pumpkin Fest to help enhance Pumpkin Fest in some way creatively. So one element that we really needed help with was an idea that we had for the music stroll to pull it down to our trail system. And we had a gorgeous fall here in southwestern Ontario, so we were really blessed with wonderful weather. And we wanted folks to be able to, we wanted to present on the iconic Black Bridge in Waterford. We have a local aerialist, and we wanted to program her on the bridge doing like aerial silks with her team. And we thought that would be an incredible thing to add to the music stroll. So imagine me going to my local government and saying, what I would like to do is suspend someone from a bridge performing. But again, we already have that relationship, that trust. We'd been doing the music stroll. We've been very candid and open about what we wanted to accomplish, and also our responsibility around COVID and our responsibility around doing kind of things in the arts that were sort of out of the ordinary. So they pushed it through. They said, yes, we trust you. Yes, we believe you. The funding was there. We were able to hire and pay this artist and her team. And then we advertised it. Again, like a pop-up event is going to happen. So we didn't say, this is where this is going to happen and this is where it's going to happen. We just like teased it so that a huge crowd didn't come. And then on the day of the event, we allowed people to know where she was and to discover it. And we had people go down the trail. And it, again, we didn't get like the biggest enemy to the success of this would be for a mass of humans to come and for there to be gathering. And so we were creative in the way that we communicated so that that didn't happen. And it didn't go very far beyond this community. Like it wasn't in any major newspapers and it wasn't like beyond the community. So again, as a rambler, governmental. So we had a lot of support and we went to them and we made sure that we were abiding by, proper guidelines. And when we needed them, they were so proud of what was already happening that they did everything in their power to make it work. And I know there's some, like municipal government sometimes gets a bad rap, red tape and all of that. There was none. It was beautiful.
Yeah, that's so great. I think everyone at every level was kind of hungry for, that was a word that you used, hungry for connections. And so, yeah, it makes sense that there was kind of support across the board to make sure that, we were giving people the opportunity to like deal with that hunger, really, like, right, to really engage and build on something that was already so important in the community. I think, Diane, there was a question about, some of the financial support for the Art Fresco project as well, and, the cost of the tables and how that came about. So are there any highlights that you can share from your project in terms of like being, having the right resources and the right finances to make sure a project like this gets pulled off?
I think we're in a unique position in that our DMO, Destination Marketing Organization, was in a situation where we couldn't support our stakeholders by placing ads at this time. That wasn't going to, we can't promote coming from the outside to our region and congregating in any way. But what we could do is run a project like this that maybe might help locals when they felt safe to do so, to go and support some of those stakeholders in the form of our restaurateurs. So we were fortunate in that we did have some budget. We were able to pay fully for the to have the tables constructed and kept that local. We also were able to pay a nominal honorarium to each of our artists who did participate per table that they transformed. We were extremely fortunate in that our host location for the table painting, they were kind enough to donate the space, the rental of the space for a 2-week period in exchange for a donation to an organization that they support. So in our instance, Lot 42 is a massive piece of real estate where outside the actual physical buildings, they were also home to a tiny home village called a Better Tent City. So not only were we able to support that organization with this project, but when the residents of a Better Tent City kept seeing people coming in and out of the facilities, they wanted to understand what are you doing in there? And so we thought at that time, why don't we take one of our unpainted tables out to the tiny home village and allow those folks to transform one of the tables. Beyond that, we were able to, at the very end of the project, donate any leftover paint and materials and with our sponsor's blessing, our sponsor being Home Hardware and Beauty Tone Paints, donate those materials so that the tiny home village could be transformed by the residents there. They could paint and do some of those pieces, but we did in the end. It was about even with the gracious support in terms of sponsorships, it was about a $70,000 project, start to finish.
Oh wow! Thank you for sharing. There's a lot of great comments in the chat box. And again, feel free to send us your questions in the chat, unmute yourself, turn on your camera, whatever you're comfortable with, and share your questions with us. But in the meantime, I'd like to highlight some comments here, going back to this concept of like building on your community and making use of the assets that already exist in the community. And there was a beautiful reflection that was shared here that I'd like to highlight for everyone on the call, is that, you know, both of these projects utilized physical assets. So, you know, there was natural spaces for picnic tables that were utilized. There were people's lawns where we could, you know, gather on, but at the same time, other assets that weren't physical in a sense, but, you know, it was the people and the relationships and the trust. Like those are all assets within a community as well that can be leveraged. And so that's, I think that's a beautiful distinction and something for all of us to take away as we kind of work towards building those connections in our communities, is realizing that we have more assets than we might think. So assets in the people, assets in the relationships and the trust, in addition to all of the physical assets that we have as well. So I just thought that was beautiful. I thought I would share that with everyone. I think there was another comment in here that said there are great projects, these are great projects and activities and can be duplicated in other communities. So thank you for sharing. So again, value in the time and space that we're creating here today to discuss these projects and to share with the broader community, because I think it really gives people the ability to really dream up some of these projects and empower them to say, you know, this has been done before and can be done in your communities as well. And I think the beauty about these projects is that although there was a lot of like logistics and obstacles along the way, and by no means was it, you know, a walk in the park, but the concept in itself is so simple and so, you know, clear. The concept is to connect communities through art. And so it really does provide the template for other communities to build on that as well. I do see a question that has come in the chat. In my area, many communities have assets, but don't always interact with neighboring communities. How can art be used to overcome a perceived border or barrier so that each community recognizes the assets of its neighbors? So maybe Diane, I know that Waterloo region is really a collection of communities. So maybe you can kind of offer some of your comments on that.
I'd be happy to. It is something that I'm very familiar with, given that we're comprised of 7 distinct municipalities in Waterloo region. Our job was to conceive of something and promote the broader region. And always, I think our response when we're asked or called to task on anything is that if we look at it through the eyes of a visitor or a local who is taking the initiative to go and see as many of these tables, let's say, throughout the region, they're not looking at it as, oh, if I cross the street here, I'm going into Cambridge as opposed to Waterloo or Kitchener. They're just looking at it as, wow, Waterloo region proper has so much to offer. And we really are trying to invite people to look less at boundaries and more at assets that make up that broader region. So I feel what you're asking and that challenge, but to try and always respond with something that's for the greater good of that area has been the way that we've tried to operate, if that helps any.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Waterloo region in particular is like a unique place where there is a collection of communities that you know, are all distinct in their own unique ways, but at the same time have a common goal. As community builders, that goal should be consistent across all communities within a broader region. Claire, would you like to offer any comments on that?
That's a really, like, that's a heavy question, and that's hard. And I think it's something that we're always striving to do. I think just like with people, communities, Norfolk County is the same way. Like there's Waterford and there's Simcoe and there's Port Dover and there's Delhi, and each community is so unique. Mm-hmm. And I think within the community, when you find out what, again, I'm using the word superpower, but within the community, like within yourself, when you find out what makes you great and unique, and you embrace that and you walk in the world that way, you bring that out in other people. So I think that's sort of what happened on a really microscopic scale with the Waterford Music Stroll, the Main Street Music Stroll. We did this thing and we felt really great about it, and there was so much community spirit. And then a neighboring community came to us, the BIA, and said, well, we want to kind of do something like that. Can you help us? And we were like, all right, but you have a different personality. You're not like us. Simcoe isn't exactly like us. So here are some suggestions to sort of craft it to, you know, who you are. And then so it was kind of contagious. And I think, again, like I'm always thinking from a grassroots perspective, but that's what we did. And it's really, really hard. It's not something that comes easily. And we have a First Nations community next to us as well. And there's always been like I've always felt like there's this boundary, like it's almost like it's a spiritual boundary. And we are working to build relationship, and we are working to connect, and we are working, there's labor involved in that. So there's not an easy answer, but I think if you're doing the work and you're doing the work on yourself, then connection is much easier. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's great insight for sure. And again, like by no means is this an easy task. I think given the times that we're in, everyone is putting in kind of more effort to be able to build those connections and to build those relationships. And so I think continuing on the momentum that we have, and really realizing the ultimate objective of, you know, the common goal that Diane was talking about, and working towards that. It's not going to be, you're not going to be able to break borders and barriers overnight, but something that is, you know, a constant work in progress. So I think that's a great note to kind of wrap up our conversation. This has been such a delightful time. I was so happy to learn a little bit about the projects that you guys have worked on, and all the beautiful stories of connection that were made through the arts. I know a lot of the community members on the call and abroad, or not abroad, but, you know, not with us here today, are grateful for your time and effort to share some of those tips and tricks and advice and wisdom and the stories. And so thank you for taking the time and space to share with us today. And with that, I will hand it off to Taylor to transition us into smaller breakout rooms to kind of engage at a more intimate level.
Fantastic. Just got to switch the pin here. Awesome. Thank you all so much. This was such a wonderful and generous conversation. I know that I learned a lot and have a ton to mull over. Just to our folks who are following along on YouTube, we're going to turn the stream off now so that folks who are participating on Zoom can spend some time together in breakout rooms if they're interested in that. So just bear with me 1 second.